Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, ObjectivelyDan. This is the live call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why every single week, live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. And we also have a very special guest every single week on this program. This week's special guest is Bryce Cornell. Bryce, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so Bryce, you co-host on the Empathetic Atheist, and we were both on an episode of the Atheist Roundtable together, and you were suggested to me as being a good co-host, so here you are all these months later, and yeah, you have a pretty interesting story about how you left kind of your religious faith. So I figured we could just kind of start off the show introducing you a bit to the folks here and telling you like what you're about, how'd you get involved with this community, and how'd you get started on Empathetic Atheist? Where did that journey begin?
Sure. Well, it's kind of a long story. I grew up Christian, but not really fundamentalist Christian. It was kind of just, in the background. My parents were both Christian, but never really super devout. I didn't grow up going to church or anything like that. I didn't start getting serious into faith until I reached adulthood, right around the time when I joined the military. I former United States Air Force, so. But yeah, right around the time, I think I was about 19, I started getting more into the Bible. I started meeting a lot more religious people around me, and I started really thinking about what I believed, or what the basis was for my Christianity. And so that kind of led me down this path of becoming more entrenched in the faith. And some of my extended relatives and family members were definitely more devout, and I started spending more time with them. And, this pretty much led me into being a Christian apologist, or at least an online apologist, and I joined a lot of religious, I don't want to say religious debate groups. They were really Christian groups, but they had, debate chat forums in there. And I found myself trying to speak to a lot of the atheists, trying to convince them, or at least provide persuasive arguments for, why they should accept the truth of the gospel of Christ. I don't accept that as truth today. But that was a path I kind of started on. And just the process of being an apologist and finding these challenging arguments that these atheists were presenting to me, it became more and more difficult, to the point where I really had to start, the more you are challenged with respect to what the Bible says, the more you have to be familiar with what it says, Right. And I had only a minimal exposure to the Bible. I only read certain parts of it, the mostly in the New Testament and mostly in the Gospels, and basically the parts that I wanted to read because they spoke to me, but I didn't have answers for any of the bad stuff in the Bible. And so that forced me to have to dig deeper, and if I was to have good apologetics and be able to convince people that this is actually the true word of God and something that's valuable for our salvation, I had to have good answers for why it endorsed slavery, or for why God allowed people to commit genocides, or for, all of the harm, or why gay people were to be killed.
Right.
I identify as LGBT myself. I'm a bisexual man. And so this is another monkey wrench in it. A lot of people would find it odd that Christianity or any of these monotheistic religions would be something that I would gravitate towards. But I was also a bisexual person serving in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell,
right,
and found myself very alone and in the closet, legally in the closet under that scenario. And so this is kind of a miserable existence, the longer you are trapped in there. And so the Bible was, I guess, really just my way of getting some sort of comfort, and but it didn't give me good explanations for why that was in the Bible, and so just studying the Bible, and then getting outside of the Bible and studying the history of the Bible, how it came to be, the different translations, trying to get different perspectives. I realized that at some point I realized that I was spending more time trying to find excuses for why the Bible was good than following the evidence where it led. You know, I was trying to interpret it through this lens of it must be good, and if it doesn't seem good, I'm not seeing it, and I need to find a way to argue to make it good. And then I realized that that was an incorrect way to search for truth. You know, if you've already decided beforehand that something was true, well, then you're not really looking for the truth anymore. You know, and at some point there was just a eureka moment where I realized, holy crap, what am I doing here? I'm not. This is not rational. You know, this is not rational what I'm doing. I'm just trying to find excuses to make it okay, but it's not okay, you know?
Yeah.
And that was my, I don't want to say descent into atheism. I could say ascent from a Christian perspective.
Deconstruction, maybe. Yeah.
Like my deconversion from Christianity.
That, you know, I find some parallels in your story with mine, because I too thought that, well, if I was to, you know, because I was part of an evangelical kind of ministry at the time. It was like, well, if I'm going to be questioned these kinds of questions, I need to have good answers, right? Because like we want to be able to spread the truth to people, but we don't want them to be confused. So we want to give the best answers possible. So I had the same experience where the more I try to look into these arguments, the more I realize, well, actually, I don't think any of these are good. And
yeah, what you said there, and I think it's fundamental to you know, always being prepared to have a reason for someone else, a reason for the faith that you profess, doing so with gentleness and respect. And if you are to be an ambassador for Christ and you are taking the words of the Apostle Paul seriously, you can't just half-ass it, so to speak. You know, You can't just say, well, the Bible says this, and if you don't agree with it, you're a sinner and you're going to hell. That, you know, that's not going to convince anybody. You have to actually take the atheist argument seriously and figure out what it is that their objection is so that you can address it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
then when you fail to be able to address it, you should reevaluate your own beliefs using critical thinking. And that's what happened to me.
You should. I agree with you in that you should. I don't know if it always happens, but I do think that's the process that should take place, right? And I want to touch on this too, because you also talked about your experience as an LGBT plus individual and a Christian at the same time. And, you know, we were talking about this before the show, but like that, having those two identities embodied in the same person, like, was not a concept that I ever had for a huge chunk of my life. You know, I was taught that, you know, you were either practicing being gay or you're practicing being a Christian. Like there wasn't these two identities did not exist at the same time. And, you know, we're talking a bit about how I listened to a podcast by the liturgists that they did an episode on LGBT plus Christians. And it was like really the first time I heard in-depth explanations as to why people who have both of those identities, kind of how they resolve the conflicts that come up when people talk about that. And I remember like being shocked at never hearing some of these reasons before, but also questioning like, well, if these people can have these reasons for things and I can have my reasons for things, how do I figure out which of these is real? Because a lot of it comes down to interpretation of like biblical verses, right? Because that's how most people defend their Christianity, right? That's how they justify their actions, is because the Bible says this. And, you know, without getting to the deep semantics of what these verses are talking about, I'm personally not even convinced that Christianity does really defend, you know, homosexuality or LGBT plus identities in any meaningful way. It didn't seem like that way to me. And so it was hard hearing that, because I was at the same time becoming more sensitive to these communities by hearing these stories. But at the same time, I was realizing I don't think Christianity actually helps at all. No. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, no, you're right. It certainly doesn't help. But one of the reasons it doesn't help, and you said Christianity doesn't help. Christianity being based off the Bible doesn't help in this manner, because the way that you just described it, being a practice, this is what you were taught. This is what the Bible suggests. Homosexuality is not a practice. You know, there are acts. You know, first of all, I love it when people say that practicing homosexuality as though it's something you have to get better at.
Yeah. Yeah.
You keep practicing.
Or it's like a religious practice, like, oh
Yeah.
yes, I'm a practicing homosexual. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
no, but
absolutely.
the way that the Bible is written, the people who wrote this clearly did not have a conception of sexual orientation, because they didn't know that that people had an inclination to be attracted to a particular gender, that people had an inclination that they would identify with other genders. This did not this is something that's not addressed in the Bible, because it never occurred to them. For them, homosexuality meant that the assumption is that everybody is straight. Everyone is naturally straight. Everyone's attracted to the opposite gender because that's the way that God made it. And that certain people, because they hate God or because they love the devil, they are being defiant, or they're practicing some sort of deviant behavior because of their sin nature. Their sin nature compels them to be deviants. And so this is the way that the Bible kind of presents it. Even in the New Testament, when you look at homosexuality, the practice of homosexuality, they're compared to murderers, idolaters, things that are actual practices, things that people do with no conception of the way that people feel or how they would identify, So they didn't know what they were talking about, which was kind of a clue to me that this is not something that's God inspired, because this is something that God would know that people have different sexual orientations. And if he was inspiring people to write on his behalf, they would have written something about that, but they didn't.
Yeah. Especially if the sexual orientations are natural in origin and not like, just a random choice for any given person to make on a daily basis as to who they're attracted to. Right. So yeah, like the modern conceptual frameworks that we have of these both gender identities and sexual orientations are exactly that, modern constructs that just don't apply when you look back into the Bible. And so like any justification you use in whether you're discriminating or supporting, it just doesn't work. It doesn't seem to make sense in the same way.
If you go back to the 1970s, if you pulled a random Christian off the street or out of any church, any denomination, and you asked them, is homosexuality natural? They would probably say no. Most people would not recognize homosexuality as a natural thing. And this kind of reaffirms that interpretation of the Bible, that it's a deviant behavior specific to humans because of their sin nature. It wasn't until recently where people started to accept the idea that animals are gay,
Yeah, exactly.
If homosexuality is more prevalent in certain species, well, then it is a natural thing, and many of them have had to change their argument since then upon being confronted with this new evidence that, homosexuality exists in nature all over the place.
Yeah.
How do you square that? How do you square that circle? So.
Even on top of that, let's say that this is a free choice that anybody can make, that, we all have equal desires for, right? Because obviously not all of us have equal desires for. Okay, like what exactly is the problem with being in these relationships as long as they're consensual anyway? I mean, even then, it really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Like it's not like if you're in a relationship with another man, suddenly your life totally falls apart in any way. I mean, there's struggles in a relationship just like there is in a straight relationship. I mean, like that's always going to be a thing. And procreation, that's going to be a different topic. But other than that, like it's just people in relationship with people. And I don't know.
Consider this, Dan, because you just said it doesn't. What difference does it make if these two other people, these two men are engaged? It should have no effect on your life, right?
Right.
But what if you are a Christian and you've been raised to believe that the Bible is the word of God, it's true and it's accurate, and you see people who are demonstrating that this thing is not harmful at all? Now you're in a conflict, So exactly. You have to interpret it as being harmful in some way, because the Bible suggests that it's harmful, it's harmful to God in some way. Oh, wait, it can't be harmful to God. God can't be harmed. Therefore, it must be harmful to humanity or society in some way. Therefore, it's wrong.
Right.
So it's a threat to you. And if you're suddenly confronted with this new information, this evidence that it's not harmful, that's a threat to everything that you believe in. You either have to throw out everything that you believe in, or at least modify your viewpoint to acknowledge that you may be wrong. You may have been growing up believing in this wrong thing for most of your life. That's very scary for people,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Well,
in a
folks,
sense, it is a threat to those individuals.
yeah, it's a threat to your identity. Absolutely. I think that's what it was for me, for sure. It was a threat to my idea of what I considered, being a Christian meant. And to me, being a Christian meant being the goodest human you could be, right? If you were a good Christian, then that meant being a good human. That was synonymous for me. And just deconstructing all of that was quite a journey, but I'm glad we're both here, on the other side, whether it's a descent or a deconstruction, here we are nevertheless. And this is Truth Wanted, folks, where we want to know what you think is true. And also if you have questions for us. So this is a live call-in show. We have the number at the bottom of the screen, and we have some open lines right now. We don't have any callers in yet. So whoever gets to call in first will probably get to you. Just talk to our call screener and we'll get you here on the show. I want to move on to a different topic here, though, Bryce. And I know I'm going to be stoking some fires with this, but I wouldn't be talking about it if you hadn't mentioned it. Okay, so last time we were both talking together, it was on the Atheist Roundtable, and one of the questions that somebody asked during my interview segment was like, "What's something that you've changed your mind on while being on the show?" And I said, like, oh, I actually became a vegan this year. And I think that was in part because of callers into the show and emails I got, and also just a broad range of things. But I probably wouldn't have changed if I hadn't done the show. I think that was important to it. And that I gave like a 20, 30 second, I don't even think it was that long of an answer. And we went to the after show.
To me, but maybe it was
I don't know. I didn't feel like it was that long. I guess it felt short in comparison to the after show.
And maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, because the after show portion, that's when the chance they get to talk to, myself and you and other people. But we almost spent the entire time talking about veganism. It was like an hour and a half conversation. It was like 5 people and then me trying to like defend this thing. And that was the first time I'd really gotten to talk about it in that great of a length, which I really liked. But you said that you've actually kind of changed your mind on things, or at least you're thinking about it more, right?
Yeah, well, so immediately after that conversation I had with you was something that I played back in my mind a few times, and I decided, I don't know if it was immediate, if it was like that week, it may have been several weeks later, but I decided, I'm married. I told my husband that, hey, I've just been confronted with a really strong argument for veganism, and I'm hard pressed to generate counter arguments from a moral perspective. And I'm thinking about trying it out. What do you think? And he agreed. He said, hey, if you want to try it out, let's try it out. And so we started, I don't want to say we went straight into veganism, because it's extremely difficult to do that. And I've learned how difficult it is to switch from a non-vegan diet to a vegan diet. But yeah. And so it's kind of been taking a series of incremental steps. And the first step was to stop buying meat products, so we have not, and also looking for plant-based substitutes as well. Right. Most of the normal foods we ate had a lot of meat. So, but so the thing is, so we stopped buying it. And then we started looking at all of the ancillary things, milk. Okay, he's lactose intolerant anyway. That's probably something we can give up. I don't know how the heck I'm supposed to give up cheese, because pizza is one of my favorite things.
Vegan pizzas, baby.
Yeah,
they're out there.
I'm working on that, but it's so that's been a little bit of a struggle. There was a little bit of a regression for Thanksgiving. I did go home for Thanksgiving, and my mom cooked a meal that I was not obligated to eat, but I was definitely going to eat it. And I guess the way that I'm reconciling this in my mind is I'm not purchasing it, and so I'm not purchasing it to bring into the house to make. And so if I'm at someone else's house where they serve it to me, I feel morally justified that, I'm not actively partaking in, the harm of animals. But I'm making a conscious choice to not purchase it, to participate in the capital process,
Yeah.
So.
And I feel that way about it too, because, that's something that comes up with these kinds of, and people feel differently about it, but I tend to feel the same way. It's like, well, they're not buying 2 turkeys, they're just getting 1 at least. And, there's an argument to be said where, oh, well, they can have the leftovers and that's going to defend them more and stuff. I get that, but I also recognize that, like you said, it's a hard transition for people. I mean, I was one of those people that actually just switched cold turkey, pun intended. But that was only because I had just been reading it for so long to, I guess, where I could do it. And also, like, I've been used to switching my diets before. I was already trying to eat better anyway, because I was in the process of losing weight and doing that whole stuff. But like it was definitely hard going to the store and realizing, oh, I can't get this, and figuring out like what to do. And I caved a few times. I went to Whataburger like once or twice. I'm not gonna lie, but like now I've been not doing it for a while, and I feel better about it. And I'm glad that I'm having more conversations about it. Is seems to be opening some people's minds to it. But yeah, how do you feel about it now?
I mean, I've slipped up a couple times as well. I don't want to give the false impression that I haven't eaten no meat since, and I already mentioned Thanksgiving. And just from what we had already in the house, one of the things, because it's a moral decision for me, but at the same time, wasting food is to me a greater, well, I don't want to say a greater immoral thing, but it's something I've always had a problem with. And so I wasn't just going to throw away everything that I had in the house that was meat and useful and salvageable, especially during the time we're living in now, where you don't want to be shopping outside all the time.
Right.
So I've had the cans of tuna that were in there, and but it was already purchased. It was in the house.
Right. And, you can cleaning out your pantry. I think that's totally reasonable.
And I mentioned, I suspect that we probably will be transitioning. Realistically, it's going to be probably a pescatarian diet. And we'll see kind of where it goes from there. But I'm on a journey right now. I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I feel confident in the choice that I made. I feel like I don't feel like I'm an immoral person for what I'm doing. I feel like I'm managing the moral responsibility, as far as I understand it, the best I can, and we'll see where it takes me.
Yeah. Like the way I feel about it now is like, well, like, if you can recycle, you should, right? Like I think that's a thing more people can do. So like, why not do it? I feel the same way about doing this vegan thing. It's like I have the education, I have the privilege, I have the buying power in my area to make those decisions. And so I can do it. And I had to be reasonable and honest with myself that I could do it, because I think it's easy to make excuses with this kind of thing too. And I will be the first, as will many people will say, that yes, of course, not everybody can switch to doing this thing right away. Of course, there's food deserts. Of course, there's populations of native peoples where they have their own distinctions and practices, and it's going to be cheaper for them to get sources of meat than from plants, because they live up in way North Canada where they can't grow stuff up there. Like I get it, but all I ask is like, what can you do? Like, what can you do in your situation with people around you? Is it something that you want to work towards? And so anyway, only reason I brought it up, guys, is because Bryce brought it up, and I thought it'd be cool. I know it's a vegan talking about veganism again, but
I wanted to give credit where credit was due. I never would have considered to do that had I not, taken part in that show and listened to your reasoning, and I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm skeptical about all kinds of claims, and the first thing I'm looking to do is deconstruct any argument. But again, when I fail, when I fail to generate a rational counter argument to something, I have to question and reevaluate my beliefs. And so I'm not above changing my beliefs or my positions on anything. My belief. Well, obviously, I used to be a Christian, and now I'm a theist.
Well, I feel the same way, Bryce. It's like, hey, I have to be honest with myself when I find these arguments and make the changes necessary if I want to be consistent with myself. And this is what I had to do. And so I think I honestly think it's going to keep being more of a thing as we talk about it more. I'm convinced of this side of the arguments, but this is truth wanted, and I'm open to other ideas and being proven wrong. But for now, I'm sticking with it. And that's how I feel. So we got some calls here. So I am ready to take some calls if you are.
Sure.
All right, cool. Let's get to it. We're going to talk to Gio, who is calling in from Arizona first here. Gio, you're on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Yeah, you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. What's up, Gio?
All right, great. I spoke with the call screener, and this is something that occurred in a home that I used to live in. I don't live there any longer, but it was a handprint that would move around the home, but it would burn into the floor.
A handprint that moved around the floor that was burned into the floor.
It moved around the home into different places.
Oh,
it would burn. It was a handprint that would looked as though it was burned into the floor. Now I've touched it myself, and it was actually a burnt handprint, which was shaped like a hand with 5 fingers. You could see it. It was a small hand, but it was a handprint.
But Gio, was this house built on ancient Native American burial grounds? Like, what do you think is the best explanation for this?
I have no idea. I think someone's playing games. Is what it is. I think someone in the home is playing games. But the only odd thing about it is that it moves, and the burned-in print moves, and where it was is no sign of a burn. And wherever the print is, it's always hidden. So I've seen it 3 times in the 20 years that I was in this home. And the first time I saw it, it was underneath a rug the room was being painted. So we had to move everything out, all the furniture out. And we only saw the handprint once we removed the rug. It was an area rug underneath the dining table. So when we moved the rug away, we could see the handprint there, and we're like, what's this? And we're going, well, there's a burnt handprint here. Well, okay.
That's really bizarre.
Then.
Wow. Okay. Do you have you don't have any pictures of this, do you?
I didn't take any. It wasn't my home.
Okay.
It was somebody else's home. I don't know if they took pictures of it or not.
Well, so you weren't living at this house.
Yeah, I lived there for nearly 10 years, and I was with them before. They were childhood friends of mine. So I've been in the house as a child, and I lived in the house as an adult.
Hey, Gio, I'm curious. Were you living in the house at the time when the handprint was moving?
I saw the handprint once when I was a kid, because my friend lived in the home, and we would go back and forth to each other's home to hang out. And that's when they were moving all the furniture, I was there, and I saw the handprint on the floor as a child. That was the first time I had seen it. Now, I had seen it 2 other times, once under a bed and another time underneath it was a planter. It was underneath a large planter that was on the porch.
How long after the first time?
It was years after.
Were you an adult for any of these times?
Excuse me?
Were you an adult at any time when you saw this, or was this when you were a kid?
I was an adult. Yeah, I was an adult when the 2 other times I saw it. Okay. I saw it 3 times total. I was an adult twice when I saw it. And the thing is, it moves and it hides. So we don't know where it is. Like, we're not searching the home looking for it, because it seems kind of pointless, because we don't know where to look, and we're just not going to turn the house over to look for this thing.
So you're living in this house now?
No, I'm living. This was in New York. The home is over 100 years old. It's an old Victorian home with multiple stories, and it's an old home that it's now in a preserved neighborhood where they can't even touch the houses because of the nature of the where it is. And it's just an odd thing that happened that I can't explain. And to this day, I have no explanation for it. And I've never told this to anyone else. at all.
That's pretty bizarre.
I've ever-
Yeah, like it's hard to say
Yeah.
without us being there exactly what it could be. We can only speculate. I would say that this is something that, if the person, whoever is keeping that house or whatever, I mean, what I would do if I was experiencing this and I didn't know what was going on, I would just set up a video camera at the one spot when you find the handprint and just keep it there and just keep it going like 24/7 and see if that thing disappears or if it goes somewhere in the house, or maybe have some security cameras. Because right. If what you're seeing is truly a handprint and not some kind of pareidolia or some other experience, then my only guess as a skeptic would be able to say, well, that has to be a human doing that. Because I mean, if it's a ghost, I don't know what the ghost is trying to prove by putting handprints all over the place. Because I
don't believe in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not one to entertain those.
A lot of times, a lot of times with issues like these, people, one of the problems is we don't really see people testing these experiences. They seem to be prevented from conducting some sort of experiment to where they could find out what this is. If I noticed some sort of strange burnt in handprint one day after removing a rug and I'd never seen it there before, that would be an oddity, but it would certainly be something that I would go back to maybe the next day or 2 weeks later, so that you could monitor the frequency at which it was moving, and if it was just something like, if you come back 10 years later and you don't notice it at that point, there could have been a million things that happened to it. But how often would it move? It sounds like the type of thing that you weren't really able to test because you didn't have consistent access to this house, and so we're kind of just left to our imagination, and I think that that's the case with a lot of paranormal experiences, where the people, they're not really in a position, or it doesn't occur to them to set up some sort of test or experiment to monitor this strange activity.
Right. Well, this all occurred only the third time cameras were available commercially for people to videotape. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we were just using normal cameras that you put film in, like 35 millimeter cameras, because we didn't have digital cameras back then.
Yeah.
So I don't live there any longer, and I'm not in contact with those people, so I don't know what they did about it, if they did anything. But I know I didn't investigate it, and we really didn't have any way of investigating it, because once we saw the handprint and we put everything back, it disappeared, and we couldn't find it until years later when things, like, they had to move furniture around the house. The handprint moved upstairs to the second floor under a bed, which how would you know that it was there? We wouldn't know.
So you're talking about different. When you say is it always on a surface? Is it the same material surface where this is like burned in? Is it different material?
Yeah, it was always burned into the floor, which was all the floors are wood floors, oak floors. So what was burned, and it was.
Go ahead, keep going.
So the last time I saw it, it was still many years ago. It was outside on the porch, under a planter. That was a huge planter. It had to weigh at least 300 pounds, full of dirt, that housed a tree. And it took 3 people to move the planter away, and the handprint was underneath the planter. And we were moving the planter to repair the porch, to repair the oak planks that were on the porch, because they were basically falling apart. And that's how we discovered that it was there.
Huh.
So,
who was it besides you that was there? You said we.
It was me. I was there. There was another friend of ours who was there, and it was the homeowner's son, who's our friend, who was there. So there was 3 people who actually saw it. And the homeowner herself, the woman who owned the home, saw it as well, because it was uncovered. Because it was uncovered the whole time we were working on the porch.
Right. And these other people that were with you, they were aware of this handprint issue existing before,
Yeah.
like you. Is it possible that, it could have been a fabrication?
The other friend, it was the first time the other friend had seen the handprint, but the son of the homeowner had seen the handprints before I have seen them. He'd said he'd seen them in other places around the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just have to take it at face value. So, but it's something I've never been able to explain, or that no one has ever been able to explain in any rational way. So I don't know what it is or what it was. I mean, I could have been hallucinating, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to.
Does the fact that you're not able to explain it disturb you?
Well, I'm not really disturbed. I'm more or less kind of like perplexed in a way. I'm not, because I don't believe in. I think there's a natural explanation for that, whatever that is. I don't know what it is, but I know that there must be, or has to be, some natural explanation for that.
Yeah, I get that, Gio. I feel like a lot of people have stories like this where it's like, I don't believe in any paranormal or extra whatever, but like, I just don't know what the best explanation is. And I'm trying to think if I have any stories like that. I must have one or two. It's like, it's frustrating because it's like, well, I can't go back in time and recreate those exact conditions and examine them in the way that I would like to now. And it's like, I feel you. I wish I could help you, but we're even more limited here on a call-in show than we would in your own head. So I don't know, man. I wish I could give you more.
We hate unsolved mysteries. You know? It's just, it sucks having a mystery that's unsolved for us.
It's just a lingering thing that I've never really talked about with anybody. And I actually only remembered about it due to a live stream that I was watching a few days ago during the Halloween.
Well, I'll say this, chat, if you guys have any potential explanations, ask them or put them out there in the chat or comments if you're watching the clip of this on YouTube or the episode or on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else you might get podcasts is where the show's available. I would say, see if we can figure this one out for Gio. I mean, I don't think we can, but like, I don't know. I don't have any better explanations other than it has to be either misremembering some sort of details or just someone pulling some sort of weird prank, or just like a handprint was left on accident and somebody forgot about it. It's just has to be something, right?
It's a mystery.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
Gio, thanks for calling. Sorry we couldn't do it much more for you, but I hope you find peace with it, man. Because I just don't know what to do, right? Yeah, really weird stuff. I don't know. You had any thoughts about that, Bryce?
Yeah, just human beings need closure, and it's hard to not think about things that we don't understand if we don't have an explanation for it. And so we will just, we rack our brains trying to figure out what could this have been. And a lot of people end up crafting an explanation that seems reasonable to them, but not something that's based on anything they've tested. They have no ability to test it. They just need an answer, and I think this is how, frankly, a lot of religions came about in the first place. When left with our own devices, right, we can either go two routes. We can say, well, I just don't know, or it must be X, like it has to be this other thing, like it has to be a ghost, it has to be the Holy Spirit, it has to be something that we've never demonstrably proved was true in the first place. So I saw a UFO when I was maybe about 15 years old, and I was actually there was a witness. There was someone else with me at the time. We both saw this thing in the sky. No explanation for it. It was clearly not an airplane, clearly not a helicopter, not making any noise. It was night, but it was emanating light. And so, but in an unusual pattern, moved in an unusual way, and then disappeared. And to this day, we have no explanation for what that was.
And Bryce, some people might say, well, so many people have these experiences where they can't explain. That must be enough evidence for something. And to me, I say, I think people are just really bad at identifying stuff in poor light conditions. Like, I don't think
it could be that. I mean, I'm satisfied with simply saying it was a UFO, because it was unidentified, right? It was
Right.
an unidentified flying object. There was definitely something there, but I have no idea what it was. I don't know if it was just a light. I don't know if it was a ship. I don't know if it was a vehicle. I don't know if it was a reflection. I have no idea, and I have no ability to investigate that, and so I can't reach any conclusion about what it is. And
you just gotta deal with the cards that you're dealt with, right?
I'm not convinced that it's aliens, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. But let's go ahead and go to our next caller here. We have Carpe Diem calling in from Colorado here. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to say something first before we get to this call, because I forgot to do it while we went to our first call. It's our patron of the week, of course. Every single week we have a special patron that we like to shout out that donates to the show. It's patreon.com/truthwanted to do that. And this week's patron of the week is, and I hope I'm going to be saying this right, Babo Ianu Adi. I think is how you say that. So thank you for donating. And again, if you'd like to donate to the show, all of it goes to making this show better. I don't receive personally any of it. It goes to making getting the equipment better and doing stuff for the show in the background. It goes through all the ACA activities. So please consider donating if you like this show. So thank you guys for doing that. And now, let's get to our call here. We're going to get to Carpe Diem calling in from Colorado. Sorry, Carpe Diem, had to put you on mute for a second there. You are officially on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
That's all right, man. You got to take those patrons.
That's right.
So when I was younger, my first marriage, I kind of avoided having kids because my wife at the time didn't want kids. And then one thing led to the other. We ended up divorcing, and now I'm happily married again. It's going on to our 6th year, and we haven't had kids so far either. It just kind of one thing happened, didn't really happen. But I had cancer about 7 years ago, and at the time, I don't know why I did that, but I did a vasectomy because I'm not going to pass on these bad genes that I have, and. Because it is a lethal mutation that I was born with. But anyways, recently my wife and I have been starting to talk about having kids and the potential of reversing my vasectomy. But I've kind of find myself in this philosophical position where I believe that it's wrong to have kids. And this is a recent development for me. Before it was different reasons. Now it's kind of like being a vegan, right? Where you were talking about earlier. I just think about the morality of bringing a kid into the world. And I have many different reasons for it. And I just kind of wonder what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I've talked about this on the show. I'm broadly anti-natalist myself. I wouldn't personally want to bring kids of myself into the world for the reasons that you're kind of talking about. We already have so many resources on this earth, and time being one of them. And of course, my own genetics is something I have to worry about with my own offspring too. And the way I think about it is, well, there are kids in the system right now that are being taken care of in foster situations that don't need to be. And I can help with that. If I decide I really want to take care of somebody, there's no good reason for me to say it has to be a kid that came from me, other than really selfish ones at the end of the day, at least how I see it. I think that more people should be adopting, and I would consider it strongly for myself. If once I'm, not in my 20s maybe, and have a stable enough life where I can do that for a kid. And, I guess that's my first question to you. And I want to know Bryce's take on this as well, but have you guys actually considered adopting as a potential solution?
So it's kind of like a tough conversation. We actually did a whole, courses to get this is a year and a half ago, to get into the foster system and be foster parents. And then we started getting calls about kids. And then every single time my wife just would not pull the trigger. And eventually we sat down and talked about what's happening. Why aren't you saying yes? And then she says, well, I don't really want to do a fostering thing. I might want to do an adopting thing. But now she's talking about maybe when I'm having a baby. And so it just seems like I know it's a conversation I have to have with her, right? Because it seems like the needle keeps moving. But for me, the needle doesn't move. It's not even just like a environmental thing, or like a vegan would more of a vegan kind of thing. And I'm mostly vegan too. I only eat the eggs of my chickens, and only because they do not like you eat them. So I have them, but I try to even stop that. But I do look at not just the environmental impact and all of that stuff, but in the fact that there are kids, but just the suffering, right? That it's
absolutely
it's hard to be alive, and perhaps, and I just don't find any convincing arguments against it. And I'll love to hear from the co-host as well too, where he is on that. But
because you asked us both, and I went straight to asking you questions.
I don't know.
I want to hear from Bryce real quick.
Either.
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, well, I guess the question that I would have, I mean, Dan kind of asked it, and you answered about your wife's position, saying that she was kind of wishy-washy on the issue. But I don't know that we got a clear answer from you. How would you feel about adoption? Would that be something that you would be personally open to?
Definitely, I'm totally on board with that. And I'm a teacher, and I can't wait to be responsible for a young human being, as crazy as it sounds.
Okay, so
do so much better than my parents did.
Right. Yeah. So from my perspective, just based on what you've said, it sounds like you guys could possibly come to some sort of middle ground. You seem to be okay with the prospect of adoption. She suggested that she could be, kind of backed away from it, doesn't seem sure. There's a middle ground there somewhere. Clearly, both of you are at a period of your life where you have expressed an interest in raising a kid. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have one on your own, but it may be a good enough start to recognize that you're both open to the possibility of adoption, and to just start exploring that possibility more than the physical reversing vasectomies and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the thing for me is it costs money to reverse a vasectomy, and it also costs money to do an adoption, right? So to me, it's like the same.
Yeah,
the same difference, you know.
I didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the last thought I had is like, I guess it's because my reasons are very kind of like academic and philosophic, and my wife is not like that, right? She's a very pragmatic, down to earth kind of person that just lives day by day, which I really admire, but I can't really convince her on the same grounds as mine, right? She's not going to be convinced by my logic of philosophy of suffering and environmental things and stuff like that. And what I worry about is that she went from let's do foster to no, I want to adopt, and now saying we should reverse the vasectomy. And I just kind of worry that, you know, if I make her not do this and then just adopt, it's like 20 years from now, she'll like resent me that I forced her to not have a kid. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know what? At the same time, though, I'll say this, Carpe Diem. You know, if you had a kid and you didn't want to, you're betraying your own values as well. So if there's going to be a sacrifice that's going to be made there either way, and it doesn't make sense for one of you to sacrifice the thing that you want just to make the other person happy, because that's not going to make both of you happy. Right. You know, I'm with you in that. I had a partner previously that, you know, I tried to explain this to them, and they seemed okay with the adopting thing, but they also, you know, expressed a want to go through the pregnancy process and you know, have a child themselves. And I totally understand that desire. Of course, like I can't conceive of it myself, you know, as someone who doesn't have the ability to be pregnant really. And you know, that's something that I can't relate to, but I can relate to the idea of, you know, wanting an offspring that you can take care of, that you call yours and stuff. Like I totally get that. But at the same time, I'm still compelled, probably like you, on these philosophical grounds of wanting to prevent suffering as much as I can. And I think that bringing another life into the world and would be contributing to that, you know, when I can take away the suffering of somebody who's already in the world who could use my help. So, you know, unfortunately, like I said, like if you decide that you want to go and do it because your wife wants to, I mean, you know, that's your choice, but I don't know if you'd be happy with it, because I don't think I would if I came to that, you know, compromise. But maybe there is more options. Maybe babysitting some more kids and seeing what that's like. And maybe, you know, some people, they say that they really want it, and then they have the experience with raising a kid for a bit and realize it's not really for them. You know, I don't know. But I think maybe there's room for more conversation, because don't don't reverse this vasectomy just because somebody else wants you to and you don't feel comfortable with it, because I can't support that, you know.
Hey, Carpe Diem, can I ask you?
I have one last question that's more philosophic. That's actually challenging anti-natalism.
Okay.
That comes from my wife. She said, she actually said, what would happen if, I get it, the world is full of suffering, right? But if we admit that and just leave it alone, we'll never potentially get to a place where it might not be like that. You know, perhaps we can get to a non-scarcity society. Perhaps we can get to a place where we can living to be 300 years old and everybody lives healthy, you know, or even crazier ideas like synergy and, you know, full automation and all of that kind of sci-fi stuff. So she says, like, you don't know if that's possible. So if you prevent us from getting there, you know, by just not having kids, of course, my counter argument is adoption, of course, but do you think that that is a valid argument against the whole anti-natalism thing, that we are kind of looking at the odds wrong because we don't know what the potential of the future could be better than now?
You know, that this was your wife who presented this argument to you?
Yeah, as pragmatic as she is, she's talked about that. You don't know the future, she says. It could be better, right? And you know what I'm saying?
That's based on a hypothetical speculation that, you know, I don't think it's like you could say that about a lot of things. I could say, you know, I could murder Bryce today because, you know, we could have the technology to bring people back from the dead in the future. You know, like, yeah, like maybe, but like that doesn't acknowledge the reality of the situation now. The thing is, there's a kid suffering in a home right now that could be better served in a family that could care for them. That's happening right now, you know, and that's something that people can do about it right now. And so, yeah, like maybe in the future we could be doing all this other stuff, but like, what about the problems that we can fix now? You know, that's how I think about it.
Thank you so much. That's good.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just have one final piece of advice, because when you told me that this is an argument that your wife made to you, that suggests to me that she has some serious thoughts about actually having a kid. And so I would suggest that otherwise she wouldn't have brought that argument up to you at all, you know? So it sounds like she has definitely given this thought. My advice to you would be to have a serious conversation with her about how important this is to her, because if she is dead set on having a kid, you know, you're right. If you don't actually have a kid physically with her, it could be something that she would regret in the future. And if you are forced to, or if you compromise your own values to satisfy her, you could regret that from in the future as well. Yep. You need to have a conversation and figure out whether this is a deal breaker or not, or if she would be willing to bend to that middle ground, because it sounds like she's leaning more towards she really wants to have a kid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the advice you guys gave. I know you guys have other callers, but I thank you for, you guys gave me a lot of good stuff here. And I also would like to say, like, I always feel like she's kind of hitting, I know it's kind of like, it sounds sexist, but it feels like she's hitting that kind of like moment in her life that she looks around and all her friends are having babies, and then she's feeling like the urge to have babies. You know what I'm trying to say? I've heard about this academically. I don't know if it's true, but sometimes I wonder if it's just not like a moment she's going through.
Do you mind if I ask how old she is?
6 years, and then she's 30. So
okay,
and so I don't know. It could be a hormonal thing, but whatever the reason is, I agree with you guys. I have to have a serious conversation with her and take it from there.
I can't speculate as to that. I don't know how you know, that's something that goes around and is heard about, but you know, to say in this moment, oh yes, this is just a decision based on hormone, like that sounds, that just, there's no good way to say that. And I don't know. I don't want to infantilize or look down upon someone's argument just because we're saying, oh, you're being irrational, because you know that obviously there's roots to that in our culture that we really want to get rid of. But I understand what you're saying though. Like I don't want to I'm not saying that this is where you're coming from either, Carpe Diem, but you got to understand, like, you know, I can't make that speculation at all just from where I'm sitting. All I'll say is,
I agree. That's why I preface by saying that I don't think it doesn't matter to me what the reason is.
Yeah.
If she feels that way, we got to talk about it, you know?
Yeah. If she feels that way and maybe she feels like that's why, that's one way to do it. But yeah, all I can comment on is the actual arguments for whether to do this or not. And I think obviously I agree with you. There's a case to be made to choose to foster, to choose to adopt. But again, as to work long-term in a partnership, that's something that's a conversation you just have to have with her. But I hope we gave you some good advice. I hope this was helpful for you, and good luck when you have those conversations.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. You guys.
Oh, and Colin dropped in the middle of him saying thank you. But yeah, thanks for calling, Carpe Diem. Yeah, it's tough. I had this same thing figuring out my values with, again, like a previous partner that I had, and it's when you have that big conflict of interest, like it's hard to navigate that. Some people will change through it, some people don't. And I've never been like married long term, and I don't know what that experience is like to try to do that work. So I don't know.
Tell you.
Yeah.
No, marriage is a compromise, marriage is a give and take, all of that. But at the end of the day, people have principles that they're not willing to bend on, or they realize that if they do bend on this, it's something that they may regret, and if you are married to someone who has fundamentally different principles than you, the earlier you find that out in the marriage, the better. It may be something that could be worked through. There may be a compromise possible, but the longer you let it go, the more difficult it becomes. And either one of them I could see could potentially be sacrificing their principles just to kind of appease the other person, and that could be disastrous. The argument as far as well, maybe she's a woman, it's just hormones or something. It not only is it sexist, but it's also very simplistic as well. We don't really have the ability to know what's going on. And one, you and I have never even met her or had a conversation with her. We couldn't even psychoanalyze that at all.
Right.
Exactly. It could just be that she's 30 years old now, kind of like he said, all of her friends, that's kind of the age where people start taking life seriously. It's different for women than for men.
Absolutely.
Their biological clock is limited in time, and so she could be at that stage of life. But at the end of the day, it's a conversation. It's a deeper conversation that they need to have. Figure out. I would say that he probably should figure out if she is willing to seriously consider adoption. It sounds like she wants to have a baby. Otherwise, she wouldn't have produced that argument. That we just say. So,
and I think it sounds like she's already changed her mind at least a couple of times during this whole process. So there's a chance she could change her mind again, and maybe they could find some sort of compromise. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. You don't want to forsake your values to make another partner happy, because that's just a partnership that is built in misery. So gotta work that out somehow. But let's go to another caller here. I want to get to talking to Yo, calling in from Texas. Hey, Yo, what's going on?
Good evening, Dan. What's up, Bryce?
How's it going? Yo?
Not too bad.
All right. Awesome. So what do you want to call in about?
Well, I am curious, like, what are some of the vegan diet that is like really helping you like make it through the day with like some energy,
Well, when it comes do you have more to the question?
Oh, no, I'm
okay.
I was stopping.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like, energy in the human body obviously comes from complex processes, but the metabolic process of how we get it is like basically like glycogen synthesis, right? Which is happening in like the liver and the muscles and stuff. And so like there's this idea that, meat is like this thing that gives us energy because it has lots of protein, but really the most of what we get our energy from is carbohydrates. And so that's going to be like your breads and things of that nature. So like there's a common misconception there that because they people feel starved for part of the day and then they eat meat, they feel really energized. But if you feel starved for part of the day, then yeah, you're going to be low energy, and then you get some food, then yeah, you're going to feel better. And I have a plant-based diet, so if I'm really quick and I'm on the go and I don't have time to eat a lot, I will have like a protein cookie or things like that to get me through the day. But the thing is, I was already doing protein supplements because I used to lift and stuff a lot. I was already kind of taking that stuff. So yeah, adding that to my diet or making it even more of a regular thing, that was nothing for me. Because you do have a certain protein intake that
good protein bars out there.
Yeah. And vegan ones too. Obviously there's that, but like every human being needs a certain protein intake per day. And it's important because like that is a problem. And I was actually kind of having a lower intake for a little bit during my switch. And I needed to up that up a bit because I wasn't getting my protein from the sources that I typically was. And as a man of my size, I have to get a bit higher than the average person. So I just got to make sure I do it. But yeah, like as long as you're meeting those macros, as long as you're getting your carbs and your fats and your protein every day for what's appropriate for your body, and there's online calculators for that, you should be fine. Again, I'm not a dietitian and I'm not a health expert, so I wouldn't exactly go to me for advice, and I'm not making any specific health claims other than what I've personally read from the literature on the topic. But the American they used to be called the American Dietetic Association. Now they're called the American Nutrition. It's not what they're called. It's the different thing now. Basically, lots of dietary organizations say that a vegan diet is healthy as long as you are doing the healthy things for it, right? And healthy, obviously is a subjective term, but if you're meeting those macros, if you're getting your nutritional requirements for the day,
like my problem. At one point in time, I had become vegan, but I would be so active while working that like I would need to be able to go 4 hours, but 2 hours into my shift, I would really start like waning. And like, I'm kind of a skinny guy, even if I do eat a lot. But man, I was just curious. Right on.
Yeah, everybody has a different metabolism as well. And like for me, I have a very high metabolism, particularly for someone my age. It's unusually high. And so I get a lot of my energy from carbs and sugar. Some people can't do that. If you have a physical makeup or metabolism to where you can't eat certain types of food, or otherwise it'll adversely affect your diet, then you can't do that. But energy for me is carbs and sugar. Protein doesn't give me energy at all. Actually, protein makes me want to fall asleep usually after I have something like that. Protein is for muscle building, and if you're on a workout regimen where you're trying to build, then you absolutely would need more protein and have to find some sort of supplements, substitutes, for that. I'm not.
So
that,
you
that doesn't
can
apply.
eat the eggs, right?
Pardon?
Y'all can eat eggs, like that's all right. Like
not for
eggs.
Not for a vegan. For a vegetarian, that's appropriate because it's not a meat product. But a strict vegan is someone who doesn't eat any animal products, and that includes eggs.
Eggs, milk, cheese, butter.
Oh man,
ice cream.
It's hard.
In one way, you can think of it as restrictive. But I've actually probably tried more food this year than I have in maybe the last like 3 or 4, because I'm suddenly finding new combinations of foods and reading the names of vegetables I'd never heard of, because I've been trying this thing. And you'd be surprised at how many things are out there to try. Now, again, that's with the privilege of living in a city where I can go to a supermarket that has a lot of options for me. It's a lot easier for me than it's going to be for somebody that lives in a small town with 2,000 people and maybe their largest grocery store is 30 minutes away. Like, I'm sensitive to people with those situations. But
you just described me perfectly.
Yeah. It's just like any small step you take to reduce your meat intake is not only going to be good for us because like we don't need to eat meat every day, like, but it's also going to be good for the environment. Like, the UN has pointed this out, and tons of environmental organizations. Meat-based diets just aren't sustainable for a worldwide population. And the more that developing nations grow, the more the demand for meat is going to rise. And the animal agriculture industry is one of the greatest contributors to climate change that we have, period. Like more so than all of our transportation infrastructure in this country. Like it
disturbs me. What disturbs me is the processing, like in which they go through it. Like that is what has turned me off from it, really. But yeah,
if you can do a meatless Monday, you're doing more than most people. And
I was gonna say small steps. Just like reducing your carbon footprint. There's little things that we can do. We don't have to go. Some of us don't have the luxury to not drive. But we many of us do have the option of maybe driving a hybrid car or a smaller car with lower emissions or whatever the case may be. But it's whatever you can do. You do what you can do within your means. And
practical. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we answered your question there, yo.
Yes, I do have a challenge though.
Okay.
Do y'all want to hear it?
Sure.
Love challenges.
To buy food and not have it wrapped in any plastic. Like, to buy food, there is some plastics that they're using the plant sucrose to make what appears to be plastic-like, but is biodegradable, which I'm cool with that stuff. And that stuff's really cool, but like the polypropylene, the plastic packaging, like trying to go to the store and not buy any plastic, it is a challenge. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a challenge too, and that's something. It's definitely something to be concerned about. There are, there like in Austin, they don't just give you grocery bags. You have to pay for it separately if you don't bring your own. I wish lots of other places did that because like we don't need as many plastic bags in the world, certainly. And a lot of there's a vegan takeout place I like to go to here that they have recyclable bags when they give you takeout and stuff. And so I like that. I wish more people were doing it. But yeah, like plastic consumption, that's another thing to worry about. And that, of course, that's going to be in all of the foods that we have, not just vegan foods, right? Where that's going to be a problem. But yeah, I don't know if I could do a whole week without buying some form of plastic, though. That's going to be hard. Maybe I could if I really tried and I really narrowed my options down. I've already narrowed my options, to be quite frank with you. But hey, yeah, I don't know if I could.
I would say that this is where the devotion to recycling comes in, and making sure that you are participating in a recycling program, or hopefully you live in an area where recycling is practiced. I do, and I try to make sure that all of my reusables are going into the correct bins and not just willy-nilly throwing things away. And I think that may be the best that some of us can do, considering the prevalence of plastic in grocery shopping or any kind of shopping, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you're buying food from the stores, I mean, that food is coming off of a truck, and that's coming from a distribution center, and that distribution center has to get it from whoever's making the product, and so that part of the process is still going to be there if you're going on a vegan diet that's based off a supermarket and you're not growing your own stuff. So, there's always going to be more things we can do. And I'm trying to focus on, what can I do right now? What's reasonable for me to do, and how can I educate myself? And maybe I should look into more of the plastic stuff too. Maybe that's a good thing to point out. But thanks for calling, yo. I'm going to get to some other callers. I appreciate your question, and I hope we answered it to your liking. We got two other people on the line right now, and I want to get to both of you guys. So please, both of you guys, stay on the line, and we'll be our last two callers for tonight. The next one is maybe a challenge to us. This is Glenn calling in from Pennsylvania. Glenn, what's going on?
Not too much. I wanted to talk about that. I think that vegetarians and vegans believe that they're saving animals' lives by not eating them. I don't believe this is primarily true because most of the animals that we eat are produced on farms and would not be produced at all if there was no demand. It seems better for the animals to live a short life, a short time, rather than not existing at all.
Well, Glenn, if everybody in the Austin area, if in my city, if they went vegan, there would be no demand for animal products in the city of Austin, right? And so, therefore, people who raise these animals on factory farms, they wouldn't be raising as many animals because the demand in the country as a whole would be down and they wouldn't have to create as much, right? Because it costs money to raise these animals. And so they have to know that they're making a return on their investment, right? So they're not going to raise. That's why this year they've actually killed a lot of the animals on a lot of these farms because meat demand went way down during the beginning days of the pandemic and they weren't breeding as many animals.
Yeah, exactly. I believe, though, that you're helping the animals by providing the demand for them so that they get to live at least a short life. If you don't have any demand for the animals at all, they don't get to live any life at all. Better to live a short life than no life.
See, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you apply that same rationale to human beings as well?
Absolutely. I would rather live a short life than no life, wouldn't you?
No. Especially if it's a
You
short
would?
life without freedom. No.
Oh,
I mean, look,
any-
long and short are relative terms, right? And so when we talk about an average lifespan, we're talking 70, 80 years, right? If by short you mean, dying of a disease in childhood, then no. What is the? But that's just me. I'm not saying that has to be the case for everyone, but I think that life is. Any life that can be lived to its maximum potential is a good life, and if your life is cut short by circumstances outside of your control, especially if the cutting short of your life is imposed on you by other people, no, I don't think that that's good. I don't think it would be good if I were born as a human being and someone said, when you turn 10, you're going to be murdered, because I would rather not have been born at all.
I disagree with that. I would certainly like to take any minute, any second of life I could get rather than no life.
Well, Glenn, if I was never born, how am I going to complain about it?
It's that the question is if you had the choice.
But but there was no being to have the choice in the first place. There was no suffering occurring. I never anguished over the fact that I was never born. So how is there suffering taking place?
But it's a hypothetical question that you're asking, and we're talking about right now. You know that life has good and bad in it. I would like to experience anything I can as opposed to nothing.
I don't know that you would make that. I don't know that you would necessarily make that same argument if you knew that there was much more potential for your life, but that it was doomed to be cut short by circumstances outside of your control, controlled by someone else. If you knew that you could live 70 years and then someone told you, no, you only get to live 10 because someone else is going to kill you, you would still want to live the 10 years?
I would take anything I could get. 10 is better than 0.
But Glenn,
anything I could get. You're doing animals a favor by providing a demand for them. And they
completely disagree.
That
doesn't make any sense to me, Glenn. How am I supposed to have a preference either way unless I'm alive? I'm not going to have a preference if I don't exist.
Put yourself out of the situation. We're talking about you right now. You understand what's going on. This is a hypothetical question. You understand
because I'm alive, because I was born. But if I wasn't born, I'm not going to have a preference.
So just for you, you wouldn't like to be living until you were 10 years old. You would rather have not existed.
Well, that was Bryce's point. But I mean, if I never existed, right? I'm not going to care.
Glenn, do you believe that
we're talking? Glenn, you imagine for a second you exist? Would you rather have not existed, or would you rather live whatever amount you can get?
But I never existed, so it doesn't matter.
Glenn, do you think that animals have a preference for existence?
Well, I guess you just can't understand hypothetical questions. We're talking about hypothetically.
You're talking about a hypothetical that literally doesn't exist. You can't say that. What if you existed and you had the choice between living and not living? People who aren't born don't have that choice. That's not even a reality. Why would I have a hypothetical
Sorry,
about a reality that isn't even conceivably possible?
That's what hypothetical means, okay?
But a hypothetical is only useful if the situation is possible, right? If it's even conceivable. I can't debate the question of hypotheticals that aren't even conceivable in reality.
Okay. All right. Suppose there's aliens that are better at acquiring food and they want to eat humans. Would you rather live 10 years and then be the aliens' food, or would you not like to live at all? Would you rather just have not existed?
I would probably rather not exist, but again, like it doesn't make sense for me to even say that. I can't follow through with this argument. It doesn't make sense to me. And here's the thing too, like we are causing suffering either way, you know, like no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that, because if I wasn't born, there wouldn't be any suffering. Right. But if I was going to be born and I was going to know that that was my fate, even the fact of me knowing that is going to be causing suffering. And, you know, a lot of these animals, they see what happens in front of them. Sometimes they can hear the noises in the room. That's an extra trauma that happens with this. So like, if you really look at how these animals live their lives on factory farms, like I don't think that they're enjoying a lot of it. And I think it's more suffering than pleasure for sure for these animals' lives. And I don't think we're doing them a favor by giving them birth. I mean, this is like what Catholics say when they're talking about, oh, we want, you know, we'd rather not do abortions and let all these people live and be born into situations where children aren't cared for properly and people have to live in poverty and have disease and have all kinds of things happen to them when they could have avoided the suffering by not being born. And that person isn't hurt by not being born. I think that's my point. You know, if we were hurting people by not being born, that'd be one thing, but that's not even what's happening. So I have to strongly disagree. And I don't know if we can go any further, but you know, feel free to make your final points.
Well, I was just wondering, is your cat a vegan?
No, actually, I feed him meat right now. I struggle with this. It's the only meat that I buy because, you know, he is a cat. He's not me. He's not making that choice for himself. And he also has feline leukemia. And so I do worry about his health complications already if I switched him entirely to a different kind of diet. I've thought of some solutions for this. You know, I'd be trying to find maybe a butcher in the area that has some leftover meat. So at least I'm not economically contributing to buying meat and stuff, or maybe the farmer's market and stuff. And that's something I have to look into. But right now he's eating meat.
Okay. I just want to also mention that we used to have many millions more horses before we had cars. Now we have cars and there's many millions less horses. They just don't exist.
Right.
If you get a chance at life, it's better to have any life you can than no life at all. And what do you think other animals would do if they were at the top of the food chain? They would eat us.
But the fact is, right, like,
first of all, there are other animals at the top of the food chain who would eat us, and they do eat humans sometimes. Right. So that's a reality. That's not even a hypothetical.
Well, we're at the top of the food chain now on the planet. But if another animal was at the top of the food chain, they would eat us if they got to decide.
They already do eat us.
A great white shark is at the top of the food chain, and they eat humans sometimes.
Fair is fair. One final comment that some animals are rare. I like mine well done.
I mean, good for you, I guess. But like this argument
I think that makes you biased and not really approaching it from it makes you it makes your entire line of reasoning biased there for you to even admit that.
Animals maim and rape each other, Bryce. You know, that doesn't mean that we should do it. Like, I don't get why people understand this. This is what Christians say. This is what Christians say about atheists when we don't have morals, right? They say, "Oh, you're just an animal. Why don't you do what everyone else does?"
Yeah, it's what they say. It's what they say now. It depends on how. Like I said at the start of the show, they had to modify their arguments from "this is natural. This is the way that it's supposed to be," versus "well, then we shouldn't be natural." You know. But I think that his argument suffered from. I don't know if he's still there, but
I went ahead and hung up because he said he made his final comments. But
his argument for, you know, it's better to exist for, you know, a short period of time than not have existed at all. Would the animals agree with him? He's assuming that these animals that he's talking about have some sort of preference for existence. Animals don't think that. They don't have the cognitive capacity to think in the hypotheticals that we do. But I know that as a human being, I would not find that sort of existence preferable, especially knowing that my right to having a full existence would be taken away by someone else. I would be pissed off that someone even decided to conceive me to die 60 years before my natural lifespan.
Right. Your preferences would be frustrated anyway, because you don't even get what we've got. And if you live a life of terror, and of not being, I mean, the conditions of fairwing pigs where they live in these cages where they don't even have enough room to turn around in.
Well, I think his assumption is that all of these animals are living happy and they're enjoying life.
They're just on a
I mean, have you interviewed the animals? Have you gotten, how do you know this? Have you gotten inside their heads? If
you asked an animal whether or not they'd like to be eaten or not, and assuming they had the cognitive capacity to answer you, they probably would say no. Like, they seem to have an interest to be alive,
even if you ask
all
them,
animals do.
Even if you ask them, do they enjoy living in this chicken coop or on this farm? I mean, has he done that? There's all sorts of assumptions that are being made here about what animals would find preferable, which is ironic because the crux of his argument is that he likes his meat well done. So it's really about what he finds preferable. It's not really about what the animals find preferable.
It's a human-centered ethics, right? It doesn't consider the preferences of other beings that aren't us, and they have preferences. And so, the thing is, and we got another call that I want to get to, and I'll make this point really quick. It's just that, if you own a dog or a cat, you're not going to, I'm betting the people that watch this show don't beat their animals, because they recognize that there wouldn't be a good reason to, but those animals probably don't like that. I don't think I need to explain to people that your animal doesn't like that. I think you don't like that because you've seen the way that animal reacts. Mm-hmm. And so it has its own preferences too, and it's expressing that. And so we're just trying to recognize those preferences. And that's why part of the reason why we decided to choose the diet that we're choosing and the lifestyle practice that we're choosing. But yeah, I just don't find the argument of, preferring existence over whatever, it just wasn't convincing. So let's just go ahead and get to our last call here real quick. We're going to talk to Scott, also calling in from Pennsylvania here. Scott, what's going on?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, first of all, hi, Dan and Bryce. First of all, I want to say what a great-looking pair of hosts tonight. It's great to have such eye candy on the screen.
Appreciate that, Scott. Appreciate it.
But, Dan, I really had a question for you. But right before I do that, let me give you a 1-minute summary of what I've gone through. I grew up in an evangelical Christian household. When I was 11 years old, I became an atheist, and I was literally expelled from Sunday school because I had the terrible idea to actually ask questions about what was going on. And my parents weren't very fond of that. But then when I was 16, they found out that I was also gay, and they threw me out of the house. And it took them a very long time for them to come around and accept me partially. And what I mean by that is when I was 45, I'm a little older than that now, but I got married legally, and they wouldn't come to my wedding. So, Dan, I've seen a lot of YouTube videos that you were interviewed on college campuses.
Yeah.
When you were a Christian. And I just wondered, how did your thinking change on LGBTQ issues?
Yeah.
Were you more open?
At the time when I had that interview with Anthony, I don't know if I was completely open to it. Maybe just like a little bit more, but I still had prejudices, I think. I still thought that there was probably fundamental differences between someone who may have identified as LGBT plus and myself. And of course, I mean, obviously there's differences, right? Like and as far as, you know, like sexual orientation and gender identity and things like that. But like, yeah, I thought it was something where it wasn't something that I could accept them as like an equal, really. I thought that if you were, we were talking about like practicing the lifestyle, right? That's the phraseology I would have used. If you're practicing the lifestyle of being gay, I had this thought that it wasn't the equivalent of being in a straight relationship, that there's a fundamental problem with that. And I think my deconstruction of that changed again when I heard the lives of Christian LGBT people who found ways of making those two identities work. And sometimes complement each other. And I realized, like people do find ways of making this work. And I thought about the reasons as to whether or not I agreed with them and whether I could do the same thing. And in questioning that, I think that was part of my entire deconstruction of Christianity, because my prejudices towards LGBT people were pretty much entirely built on Christianity. And I think it is for a lot of people, it is just kind of religious reasons. When those religious reasons kind of fall away, there's not a lot of room to be really discriminatory towards LGBT people, unless, you know, you just want to say, oh, I think they're weird or something. And that's just not being very empathetic or really understanding of how people live their lives. And it was just a process of empathy for me, I guess, of realizing, hey, these people, they have preferences just like I do, and they want to live their lives and have healthy relationships just like I do. Or sometimes they just, you know, they just want to live their lives. And yeah, like Christianity doesn't really support that. It says that there's something wrong with that. There says that there's something that needs to be changed about that. And I don't think there is. I don't think you have to change that. I think people can be happy and have all of those identities, and live perfectly normal lives and just, be at peace with themselves and the world. The only thing holding us back from accepting that, I think, is religious ideologies and the prejudices we're then, you know, because I don't see a lot of secular people talking about LGBT people as badly. I mean, it happens. It's just really not that frequent. It's mostly coming from religious people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I always think the thing that my parents were most disappointed about was the fact that I became an atheist at age 11, because I sat there and I thought about it and I realized that it was all just ridiculous nonsense. And that really, I think, was what broke them. And they're still evangelical Christians, and we still have problems, but...
How old were you when you came out as gay?
16.
Okay. And so that could be, and you said that they disowned you or kicked you out of the house, at least when that was revealed.
Yes.
So it would seem to me that they had a bigger problem with that, because they didn't kick you out of the house when you turned 16, knowing that you were an atheist. It was you being gay that caused them to kick you out of the house. Right?
That seemed to give them a better social excuse to do that. I don't think they could have gotten away with just kicking me out because I was an atheist.
I don't know if that is a good social excuse or not. Maybe in the area that you're in, but yeah,
I don't think it was either. But
yeah. And this is,
I didn't have that experience, and I'm so, like, I feel sorry for people that had that experience, because I can identify with pretty much everything that you said, except the parents not accepting you. You know, I came out as gay before I came, or bisexual at least, before I came out as an atheist. And depending on who you ask, I never actually came out as an atheist. A lot of people know, a lot of people probably still don't know. So, but it's not a discussion. You know, I'm at the age now to where it doesn't, I'm not concerned about being kicked out of a house or whatever the case may be. And so I'm free to talk about those sort of things. But as a child, it never would have occurred to me to come out as, you know, I grew up in an era well, probably the same era. I suspect we're probably close in age. Back then, you didn't come out at that age because it was not socially acceptable. We're living in a different time now to where, kids can come out earlier because it's a little bit more accepted. There's youth.
That was the thing.
Groups in school now, and kids don't beat you up for being gay. It's totally different now from when I was a kid.
That was the thing I had to get over too, Scott, because I was deconstructing this and I was like, well, okay, I get it when adults do it, but don't force this on the kids. That was my thought. I was like, oh no, the kids, they already know too. Like they got it, like maybe they don't have themselves completely figured out, but they know better than I do about their own life experiences and stuff, right? So it's like it was just a series of deconstruction for me. To go back to your original question, Scott, like it's like I don't think I don't think I would grow up and view LGBT plus members the same way if I didn't have my religion on me. I probably would have been more accepting way faster if I didn't have that built into me, and that's that's a big reason why you talk about this stuff. Like one of the last conversations I had at a church, as that I could have called myself a member of, was when this church I found out that they had invited this speaker that did this gay conversion therapy stuff. And I was having this really heated conversation with the other Christians there because I was just getting woke to this idea that, hey, none of this stuff is based on science. We can't even talk about this. And I remember a guy put my hand on my shoulder and he said, like, why don't we just talk about this later? And I realized in that moment, like, we are never going to talk about this if this is how you feel, if you don't want to talk about this now, because you guys were willing to let a guy go on stage and give his entire belief system about how we think that we need to put gay people in conversion therapy. And yet I'm giving my dissenting opinion, and now's not the time for it. And that told me everything I needed to know. They weren't interested in being open to differences. They were interested in confirming their prejudices and confirming what they already believed was true. And that's when I knew I had to leave that group. And I didn't look back. I was already kind of an atheist at that point, but I didn't have a lot of friends outside of my church group. But I couldn't stand in good conscience with them anymore after that. So
Dan,
yeah,
you were a Christian.
Yeah.
Did you have any LGBTQ friends, or did you accept any of them?
When I was a Christian?
I think when you were.
Yeah. I had people there. A friend of mine came out to me my senior year in high school, but he did it like as we were like the day before we graduated. He was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm gay," and then like we didn't talk after that because we like moved on with our lives. And I definitely knew some LGBT kids in high school. Well, I don't know if I knew any. I don't think I went to school with any trans kids in high school, but I definitely knew some queer identifying kids in school. And I guess some of them did go to. In retrospect, they probably went to church with some other friends in different communities, but I didn't go to a super progressive church at the time, so I don't know how they identify with those experiences. And I know now that I have more than one friend actually since high school come out as gay that were Christian and have now deconstructed their Christianity too. So yeah, like I wasn't super good friends with any gay people. I had acquaintances, but I didn't have any close relationships. Now that didn't really happen until after I was in the process of deconstructing.
So, and I think maybe a good follow-up question to that would have been, would you have had gay friends in that state? You didn't have any as a matter of happenstance, but if you knew someone was gay, would you have been friends with them?
I think I could have been friends, but I think my level of closeness to them would have been diminished. Like there would have been a threshold that I couldn't cross because of my beliefs. And that's really, really sad. It makes me think of that conversation that like Dave Rubin had with like Ben Shapiro about they were talking about, because like Dave Rubin is married to a man and I don't know, and I can't remember exact details. Ben kind of basically just invalidated their whole marriage, like saying he doesn't agree with them or whatever. And it's like how can you really be friends with somebody if they completely invalidate who you are as a person? And so like I don't know if anybody would want to be friends with me because I had those beliefs, like granted I wasn't like a picketer on the streets about it, but like I had prejudice that I had to look at really closely, and I'm glad I don't have it anymore. But
Yeah. I would suggest that it probably would not have been a meaningful friendship. It would have been a friendship in name only, you know, because this is the same type of thing when a racist tries to say that they're not racist because they have black friends.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You have, if you may have black acquaintances and you may have a favorite black person, you know, this is assuming that the person is actually a racist, but a lot of times they don't recognize their racism if they have a friend of whatever race they're being accused of being racist against. But you know, if you're making an exception for this one person and using that as your excuse for not being a racist, that fails because you're just making an exception. He's not like the other ones, and so you're willing to hang around him. And that's assuming that you even give him the same level of friendship that you give your other friends, you know. And so
I agree with you, Bryce.
I don't see what value it is to even call that a friend other than to save your reputation. You know, I have friends. I have black friends.
I talked to an older gentleman one time who was trying to convince me. He said, like, oh, no, I've had gay friends. I had a gay roommate in college, and we called him, I want to say it was like Gay Tony or something. I think that's the Grand Theft Auto thing, but it was like Gay something. Like that was the name that they called him. It was like, well, the fact that you had to label him that, like, that tells me a lot about the relationship you had there. You know, like obviously you saw him as an other, and like it's just like. And
what choice did he have but to go along with that? I mean, if that
exactly. In that time,
if that was the price that he had to pay to have friends that people would call him Gay Tony or whatever, well, then that was the price he had to pay, but it was certainly not something that he chose, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so frustrating. The people who came out in times where it wasn't as accepting, shout out to you guys, shout outs. Cause like, that I cannot imagine. Yeah. So
I think I'm pretty sure I dated Gay Tony. No, that's just
I've played the Ballad of Gay Tony.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
I'm just amazed, Dan, at how fast your opinions changed, because I have a family who disowned me, threw me out on the street, didn't talk to me for years, and yet you went from a YouTube Christian to a host of Truth Wanted in a relatively short amount of time. And I really appreciate everything you do.
I thank you for saying that, Scott. I really think I'm a product of my times, though. You know, I went to a public university starting in 2014. You know, like I live in a completely different era than what you and what Bryce has had to grow up with. I'm surrounded by more open-minded people and people who were already doing that activism and who were already talking about it before I ever hit the scene. So I attribute anything that I gain from the people around me. Nothing that I'm saying here is unique or original. I think it's just a cobbling together of what other people have been making the point about for years. I just think more people are. It's easier to be brave about. It's not saying that it's easy to be brave about it, but it's easier to be brave and speak up about these things now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I hope that it becomes easier to talk about for other people because it's important. And I hope there's going to be other people like me. And I'm confident that there are, but you know, I also don't think progress is necessarily linear in terms of history. I think we can backslide if we're not careful, but I'll keep being vigilant and I'll keep doing a talk show if it helps people out. And I appreciate you saying that, Scott. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the call here because we're a bit out of time, but thanks so much.
You help a lot. Thanks, Dan and Bryce.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you guys.
One thing I would say to him as well, if he watches this back, is consider the generational difference between not only between him and yourself, but between you and his parents, because that's really what the comparison was about. You are 25 years old. I think he said he was over 45. I'm guessing his parents are at least in their 60s. It was a very different era, and they had access to different information. They did not have the information was not at your fingertips the way it is, you know, in the era that you grew up in. So not only society has changed, technology,
oh my God,
changed, information has changed, everything has changed.
If I didn't have the internet, I might not be here right now.
If you didn't have the internet, would you be an atheist right now?
I don't know. I don't know if I would, because I didn't know any atheists in real life, really. And like, it was the first time I got exposed to a lot of these talking points were people online. So that plays a huge role too. We'll never know for sure, but it would definitely be a bigger struggle. But yeah, I'm 24, will be 25 in January. And it seems to be a general trend that kids, myself and younger, I don't know if it's appropriate to call myself a kid anymore, but
depends on how old you are.
Depends on how old I am, I guess. But like, you know,
no, it depends on how old we are.
Oh yeah, that's true. I call myself a zillennial. I think that's appropriate. That's another conversation. Point is, I hope that this becomes more the norm. It seems to be in this country, but not the world. Not yet. We still got a lot of work to do, and we'll just keep fighting the fight. So we need to wrap things up, though, because we're about out of time here on Truth Wanted. I want to give a special thanks to Bryce for being on. Bryce, thank you so much for being a guest.
Anytime. I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, where can people find you at if they want to see more of your stuff?
Well, I am currently co-host of the Empathetic Atheist YouTube show, so you can find me there usually on Tuesdays. And there's the links down there. So really, any of those links, I'm on Facebook as Bryce Aroni. Although I think I actually just changed that to Bryce Cornell, but if you type in Bryce Aroni, it'll still link to me. But yeah, I like doing any time I'm invited as a guest to do these kinds of shows. You know, I love talking about theology, atheism, theism, skepticism, reasons to believe, basically all of those things. And it's a learning experience for me. And so it's not like, I don't consider myself a scholar who's teaching everyone else. You know, I have my own thoughts based on my own experiences and observations, and I'm perfectly happy to share them and listen to other people's. And yeah, that's what it is. It's an information exchange, usually sometimes turns into debating, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I've watched The Empathetic Atheist. It's a pretty cool show. I may or may not have been on there myself. Well,
send us a shout out, because we would love to have you on.
Yeah. I've talked with Justin and stuff before, but yeah, it's really cool. You guys should check it out if you haven't already. And Bryce will be joining us as well in the Discord after show if you want to talk to him now. So stick around if you're watching this live. We're going to go to Discord in just a sec. But before we do, I got to tell you where you can find me and this show. Again, this is Truth Wanted. It's live Fridays, every Friday at 7 p.m. Central. And I am the host, Objectively Dan. You can find me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. And you can email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org. If you like this show and you really want to support it, there's a couple different ways to do that. I already mentioned the Patreon. That's a pretty cool place to do it. Patreon.com/truthwanted. Another way to support the show is to get in on the merch. We got some merch in a store. We got masks. We got hoodies. We got shirts, stickers, and there's other stuff on there too. So check out that bit.ly link in the description. And the description of that, it's going to be on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Please like and subscribe. It always helps us out. I also want to give a shout out to the Facebook group. The Truth Wanted Facebook group is really cool, and it's where people have discussions about this show. It's pretty rad. Go check it out if you like being on the Facebooks. And last but never, ever, 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 not least, I have to thank the wonderful, awesome, supportive crew that helps make this show happen every single week. There's the crew. Puck is rocking the Truth Wanted mask. He's repping. He's doing great. Got the crew cat. Vern's doing some trickery here. He's got a giant, it looks like he's got a giant hand just coming out of his head there. That's really weird. You can't tell on audio, but yep, there's our crew cat and a Christmas tree with sunglasses on fire in the background. Don't know what's up with that, but your crew, you're doing great. Thanks for making the show happen, guys. Bryce, was there anything else you wanted to say before we hopped off here?
Not really. Just I had a great time. It went well. It wasn't too combative, but it was. I feel like I've had a similar experience to something that we might have on the Empathetic Atheist after parties that we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great time. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'd be happy to come back anytime you want to hear from me again.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Bryce. And again, we're going to go to Discord, so come check us out there. But if you're listening to this otherwise, remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.